Right, hello, welcome to Sisyphus Complex Solution. This is episode 177 called the Mandela Effect. I'm sure the title page here and that will confuse the hell out of some people, but having Ben here in front of, just in case you didn't know, and a South African ANC flag, that might be a little bit confusing for some people, but presumably the fact that the title of the episode is the Mandela Effect should kind of give the game away. So what we're going to be looking at this week is the National Army Museum. So obviously deal with the finances first, as is the process, and the benchmark year of 2019 to 2020 are the ones that I like to stipulate outright. So we've got a net contribution of 35k, average salary of 45k, and a cost of employment of 56%. Museum, kind of expect that. Despite the net position tending to be somewhat volatile, as you can see over the course of the 5-year period, it does end up with an overall net contribution basis. And the telling part really is how the staff numbers and the operating expenses and that are fairly constant. So when it comes down to, again, because the words keep coming up in political discourse lately, there was no austerity. Even within this particular organisation, no austerity. There never is. I wish people would actually stop saying stupid nonsense like that. But anyway, I can say that the numbers for 2021 to 2022 and their claimed high return in comparison to other years, not necessarily as an overall figure. This is actually, the reason why that happened is actually because of a classification called impairment or impairment reversal. This is something that I really don't particularly like. But it's something I do need to actually sort of show in that so that you can understand. Here we are over over a 5-year period as they've reported it, and like I say, it's something that I don't actually think belongs on a P&L. So what this basically means is that they've had assets that has lost value, and they are writing that off via the operating expenses. This is the kind of shenanigans really that has been enabled because of this connection with the IFRS, and very specific in terms of what they enable government officers to be able to get away with. To my mind, this is something that should never actually leave the balance sheet. If we're talking about an asset, it belongs on the balance sheet. And we can see that they're, from that 5-year period that they've reported here, and that you can see that they're doing this on an almost annual basis, where I just don't see the need for this continual, almost, I mean, there's only 1 year within their reporting there where they haven't actually done this valuation system. I say, presumably there's got to be something wrong if their assets are continuously losing value. That requires looking into just on that alone. But it's a good example as to how it is that they are actually being able to present themselves in a more positive light. And like I say, that's the kind of creative accounting, I think they call that I don't really think should be being enabled, and I certainly don't think that most people understand that this type of activity is taking place within government. It's, the as per usual, it's, the private sector and that's doing all that sort of stuff, not government, of course not. Anyway, I mean, if you had a regular business that tried to do this sort of thing, the taxman would be all over you, and obviously you'd have all those same useful idiots that are screaming for more government, your leftists, the imported ideology. The reason why I'm saying that. they'd be screaming like mad at anybody in the private sector if they came across something like this. But because it's government, daddy government's okay, isn't it? That's your socialism. If you do remember though, that I had actually run through this entire process of what this IFRS actually has enabled these government offices to do, and how that is being utilised as one of the parts of this agenda tentacle from the World Economic Forum and the United Nations agenda, where it enables them to have their tentacles into all governments and commit the kind of corruption that that's all about in the first place. So it might seem odd that there'd be something as fairly seemingly insignificant as performing this kind of an activity via a museum, but it's that method of the scope creep, how it then starts to, they can test the ground on things like this that nobody's paying attention to, but then it creeps out to all of the other offices of government, and then they come back and say, well, we've been doing this for years. Why didn't you notice? You didn't complain about it before, that means it's okay. That's the kind of bullshit practices that we're looking at insofar as this is concerned. So it does mean that this is yet another office that would absolutely have to be forensically audited, and once again this IFRS system would have to be completely removed. So that aside, the finances aside, in terms of who it is that we're talking about, it should be fairly obvious that it is a museum. I mean, they've got one kind of spicy comment in terms of what they have on the website to introduce themselves effectively, of being for everybody no matter what they think about the British Army. Now that can kind of be red meat to the patriotic mindset, but I don't think that that's exactly what they have in mind in reality. It's the kind of thing where if the domestic population, the actual indigenous population, was to be looking at something like that and thinking, right, okay, that's us being unapologetic for all of the things that everybody seems to want to accuse us of these days. Those people then might think, well, okay, well, we'll kind of forgive what is a plain and obvious financial indiscretion. But we certainly shouldn't be distracted by that kind of rhetoric and attempt to sidetrack, because you quickly get dragged back into the real world of the institutions no longer being that which they claim when you actually do pay some attention to what it is that they're actually doing. So timing can be everything with this type of situation, but considering the timing is that in terms of the kind of ideology that is being pushed on people via locations like this and institutions like this, it tends to be pretty continual these days. So insofar as the current website is concerned, their latest bit of propaganda, can anybody spot what should be a pretty bloody obvious problem with the picture side of this, with this latest sort of exhibition that they're trying to push at the moment? Take a wild guess. I mean, there's a reason why this is a painting rather than actual photograph, and that's because we are talking about Burma. It's called Beyond Burma for a reason. It's about Second World War, the Japanese invasion of Burma. Now the Burmese people don't quite look like what you can see in this picture here. They look like that. For those that are a little bit uncertain as to the geographical history, and that Burma is now Myanmar. And so, in order for you to have a little bit of a further trigger as to what kind of country Myanmar is, that's why I've got the picture that does include that Aung San Suu Kyi, whatever her name was. She was flavour of the month until she wasn't. So basically what you've got going on here is an exhibition that is tricking you into thinking that, you know, you've got these forgotten armies that saved Burma. I don't think these forgotten armies quite look like they've just come straight out of Rhodesia somehow. There is also other sort of claim within this, and that's about the how the Indians were involved at the same time, which is a little bit of a stretch, really, considering that the in terms of the fighting against the Japanese element of this particular time frame, it's not really likely that there would have been that many Africans or Indians involved in it, realistically, because if they want to do this usual sort of pictorial bastardization of history that wants to make everybody think that, you know, it was the Africans that saved everybody in the world, and then the Indians were there to back them up. Well, aside from that being obvious revisionist shite, of course, the Indian part would be quite a hard sell on account of the fact that that was the exact same Indians that were being starved at that particular point in time, not because of Churchill, as they like to try to lie about there, but because the Japanese had basically cut off their rice supplies. There's a reason why Burma became an important location to be rescued of a fashion, and it's simply because food. A lot of the rice that the Indians were dependent on was coming from places like Burma, and so in the battles within Burma, I mean, I dare say you could have found one or two little black faces or a couple of Indians that are part of the that caste system that made sure that they got fed. You may well have got a few of them in there. Not many, though. I wouldn't have thought, which is the reason why you don't have any photographic evidence of it. It'd have probably been made up of the people that look a little bit more like the Burmese themselves. But, you know, let's for the time being, let's just go with their narrative. Because I think there's a good reason why we might need to start sitting back and going, okay, your narrative. Everything was done. The Second World War wasn't won by the Brits at all. It was all Africans and Indians that did it. Let's go with that. In the meantime, just again, in order for people to understand how things eventuate, we can also remind ourselves and that of the fact that this modern day Myanmar, quite an interesting location that's become, because one of the main reasons why that's Aung San Suu Kyi, I'm not going to try to keep saying these names, one of the reasons why she's become forgettable in terms of the ideology that we have at foot these days is because she was actually in charge of an awful lot of the peaceful Buddhists. You know, those ones that look a lot like the Hare Krishna Brigade. Another little link to India for them. Well, they took a rather distinct dislike to the Muslims trying to take over Myanmar. So, yeah, not all bad then, eh? Just a little example of the standard sort of when you want to blame it all on the white man, there's certain other people in that can turn around and go, actually, I think we need to take care of our own nation. Thank you very much. It tends to happen in quite a lot of places, you'd be surprised. But anyway, if that weren't enough, we've also then got to understand how, once again, bringing things into the modern day, how does anybody discover anything about the military these days, about the army? Well, it wouldn't be complete without a graphic representation that the only people that pay any attention to anything, and that is apparently a bunch of foreigners. I'm assuming one of these is like a Sikh, and then God knows, one of them looks like some sort of just come out of a bloody Mexican village. Absolutely no idea, but pretty obviously not white English, are they? So this is the kind of narrative that has to be created, and they just can't help themselves. They have to put it in every aspect, all to do with history, all to do with anything that happens today. History was based off of everybody was black and brown. Anybody that does anything today, and that is black and brown. Okay, so if that's the case, and they want to claim that our forces had nothing to do with the white indigenous Brits doing any of the actual work and any of the actual fighting or anything along those lines, then we have to also then understand that this narrative plays out throughout the history of Britain. But let's go with England more than anything else now, because it's England that tends to get the brunt of this. So let's just assume that all this narrative that keeps being created and being pushed out into the public, and this kind of propaganda, everything was based on black and brown people. Us whiteys, we didn't do nothing. Everything was created by black and brown. Everything was invented by black and brown. It's all foreigners, and English did nothing. Let's just take that as a given. If that's true, then we didn't do colonisation either. We didn't do slavery either. We didn't do any of those things. You can't claim that blacks and browns did everything, and all history of England is based off of the influence of the blacks and browns, and then just turn around and go, oh, but you just did all of the bad bits. But no, you want it, you own it. You want to claim it, own it. Fine by me. I mean, there weren't that many. There's a reason why that's got to be true, because there was hardly any English anyway. Tiny little country, tiny little island. So how could we have dominated the world? Well, we couldn't have, could we? The blacks and the browns did it. There you go. Problem solved. No more racism. Wasn't us. Wasn't me. Simple. Let's go with that. This is the history, and this is everything that they want to claim. So be it. But then by default, it also means that those black and brown people are also by default the oppressors. And you can turn around and make a good case for that, considering white people are actually the minority in the world. Just a simple fact. We are the minority. So us whiteys, we are the oppressed ones. So we need our country. We need our freedom at last from this black and brown oppression. Because after all, I mean, it was the blacks and the browns that did actually create slavery. It wasn't us. We were too busy being invaded by communist retards because I mean they've always basically had that mindset even before communism existed. The fuckers from over in Europe. The entire leftist ideology is an import from Europe. It doesn't come from here. We were too busy getting invaded by those bastards. So no, we didn't do any slavery. We didn't do anything wrong. We've never done anything to anybody whatsoever. Europe, particularly the French and the Germans, and then all of you blacks and browns. You did it. You did it all. We're the oppressed. Give us my reparations, man. You can't have it both ways. And I know that there's, obviously in that this whole thing has to be wrapped up to try the same as everything else, and that a bit like the socialists at the moment that want to call everybody that is opposed to them, they want to call them a Nazi, despite the fact that Nazis are socialists. They have to try to project their own foreign ideology onto others, because it is, again, a foreign ideology. Doesn't come from these lands. Socialism, Nazism, fascism, communism doesn't come from England. It comes from Europe. It doesn't belong here. But they want to try to project that onto us because they don't want to admit that it's theirs. Same as like with the slavery and the colonisation and all that sort of stuff. Colonisation in particular belongs to Muslims, very much so. Doesn't belong to us. We couldn't possibly have colonised anywhere because you blacks and browns did it all. Remember? You can't have it both ways. And I know that's obviously a problem for all these blacks and browns and Europeans because they are suffering from a severe case of Anglophobia. They're jealous of us because we're better than they are, because we don't have their fucked up ideology. We don't behave the way that they do. So we're the victims. It's us. Poor little white indigenous people from England. We're the oppressed. Stick that in your fucking museums. There you go. It's going to be a fairly short episode, this one. It's a museum, there's not really that much to say. Right, so from the benchmark period, at least we have we've got another office adding yet more net contribution rather than being a taxpayer burden, but obviously it's the MOD. That is to come. In terms of policies for this museum, I've got to put it into review and reform where the financials need to be sorted and get rid of the ideologues from this, as per usual, and probably start by removing the pole that, I'm Polish. I worked in the military, but I'm Polish. Amazing how you suddenly discover how Polish you are after you've left the military and then gone to work for McKinsey. Strange that, isn't it? Let's get rid of him for a start off, eh? I don't think this is one that can be put out to sort of stand on its own 2 feet. Not entirely anyway, because it does need to have this link with the Ministry of Defence. And when the Ministry of Defence and that stops doing the actions at the behest of these black and brown people, of course, and then you might find that there's peace around the world. Just going by their logic. So that's pretty much it. I mean, I did say last week there's going to be 2 other videos on the way, and they are being created. One of them I was waiting for a particular response to come through. I've had that now, so I'll be moving forward with that video. That'll likely be on the Moirai Appropriation channel. And then the other one I said is about the data, and that in particular around pensions. It's been quite laborious and that, getting all of the data together and that, but the fundamentals are there now, and I'll just have to figure out how I'm going to actually present it, because I know people like their pretty pictures rather than looking at numbers like an adult. But there you go. Ho-hum, such is life. Right, I think, like I say, not every episode has to be an hour and a half long. Sometimes we can do shorter ones. And it's really good to know, of course, that we white people are the victims, and that you black and brown people are all the racists, the Anglophobes, and the scourge of the world. You're responsible for everything, by your own admission. And that all ideology that is causing all problems comes from Europe, not from England. Own it. Bye-bye.